Hi there, it's Susie, your Seattle Tacoma real estate specialist with another edition of Susie Sells series. I'm coming at you here today to talk about home ownership today as a hedge against inflation tomorrow. So let's go. Okay, so today I'll be talking about home ownership as a hedge against inflation. Now, why is that important for us to be talking about? Well, as we see prices rise around us, like at the gas pump, at the grocery store, home ownership is certainly not immune to that in any way, shape, or form. And neither is rising rent. So we're going to talk about that as well. But one of the things we want to focus on is how locking in someone's fixed monthly cost, their biggest cost being home ownership at today's price, is so beneficial to safeguarding someone from, let's say like hedging against that inflation and that rising costs around us as we move forward. So I want to begin with a quote. And the quote is from Investopedia. It says, real estate is one of the time honored inflation hedges. It's a tangible asset, and those tend to hold their value when inflation reigns, unlike paper assets. More specifically, as prices rise, so do property values. So, what we can see here is that home ownership is one of the things that you can lock in the cost today. It's an asset that's increasing in value in time. And as prices rise and home values rise and all the prices around us rise, locking in that fixed cost in home ownership is really game changing as a hedge against inflation tomorrow. So, what I want you to do, or what I want to do, is I want to show you a visual that really, it depicts what we're talking about, home ownership outperforming inflation over time. Since I'm a very visual person, I figured some of you might be as well. So, let's take a look at this slide here. This is home ownership as a hedge against inflation, and I want to break it down for you so you can really see what we're talking about here. This is home price appreciation versus the consumer price increases over the decades. And it goes all the way back to the 1970s. Now, the blue bars are the average inflation rate for the decade, and the green bars are the average home price appreciation for each of those decades as well. So let's look at the 70s to start with. Inflation increased at 7.1% in that decade, and home values appreciated at 9.9% in the same time period. So home ownership outperformed inflation. And where do you want to be in inflationary times? In that asset that's overperforming inflation. Now, in the 1980s, it was a little bit more balanced, 5.6% inflation, 5.5% home appreciation. And then look at the 90s. We start to see home values tick up again a little bit more, outperforming inflation throughout that decade. Now, we know the 2000s were very different. Home prices performed at a very different rate than what we've seen in many other decades, and even what we're seeing today and potentially tomorrow. We also had a different housing market. We had the oversupply of homes. We had lending standards that were vastly different than they are today. And homeowners didn't have the equity that they have in their homes right now. So fundamentally, a different market where we're not headed going forward. So home prices did not outperform inflation in the 2000s. But look at the 2010s. This is where home values really started to kick in. Homes started appreciating much faster than inflation, 4.9% versus 1.8. And then 2020 and 2021, what's happened here. Massive home appreciation. A drastic difference where home values outperform inflation. So, over time, what you can see is that home ownership is generally looked at as this great hedge against inflation because home values are performing better than the inflation rate. That means that someone buying a home today can lock in today's costs and protect themselves against the rising cost of inflation in that biggest monthly payment going forward. Now, this becomes really important when we start talking about renting, because renting takes on the risk of rising rental prices year after year after year after year after year after year. I've shown you that data, and if you've been following along, how rental prices are truly skyrocketing. So let me share a quote with you here that's really powerful for renters. It says, and this is from the bank rate, a fixed rate mortgage allows you to maintain the biggest portion of housing expenses at the same payment. Sure, property taxes will rise, other expenses may creep up, but your monthly housing payment remains the same. That's certainly not the case if you're renting, and that's because rental prices rise year after year after year. And so this becomes really powerful for someone who might be sitting here thinking, well, I could buy today, but I'm going to kind of press pause a little bit and I'm going to wait. I'm going to wait and see maybe what happens to home values, if they drop, if they rise. Well, all the forecasts that we've seen show that home values are projected to continue rising. So here we are. I really want you to think about that. All my renters out there that are kind of waiting, the time is now. With the low interest rates that we still have in play, you can lock in a rate today for the next 30 years. So you keep a constant house payment, even if property taxes go up, other expenses go up. That's huge, because with rental properties, it is going to continue to rise. And you have no tax benefits. I hope you enjoyed today's video about home ownership versus inflation, and be sure to check out next week's video where I'm going to be tackling mortgage rates on the rise. Also, don't forget to follow me on social media at Susie Wilder-Poe Realtor. Have a great day.